While there are plenty of Pokemon that can erase you from existence with a single move, what about the Pokemon that do absolutely nothing and kill you anyway? The Pokemon like classic Magcargo, whose body is as hot as the surface of the sun. Lanturn, who could cause a black hole just by flashing its light in the deep sea. Or Minior, who grow too heavy to sit in the atmosphere and crash down on top of you. There are nearly 50 Pokemon who can wipe you off the face of the earth just by existing, and now, it's time to warn you all about their existence. Howdy there, I'm Krillic, and while everyone talks about Magcargo burning everything around it into nothingness, it got me thinking, what other Pokemon could erase us from existence by doing absolutely nothing, or at least nothing to us directly? These Pokemon are not using defense mechanisms, meaning no poison dust from Spupa, no dying from eating Pokemon like Qwilfish, and no life absorbing from Pokemon like Litwick who actively steal your life energy. These Pokemon can fly around and accidentally kill you. They can release spores as they try to reproduce and you accidentally inhale them, poisoning your body. They can just float through you nonchalantly and send you to the pearly gates. No hunting, no active destruction, nothing. So, how about we explore who these Pokemon are? Butterfree, like many butterfly and moth Pokemon that we will talk about throughout this for some reason, can just fly around, and as they do, they just release scales all over the place. This wouldn't be an issue if Dex entries didn't explicitly state its wings are covered in poisonous dust. If you see one flapping its wings, be careful not to inhale any of the dust. This dust is nice for Butterfree since it repels water, but these scales, being toxic, are actively and passively released by Butterfree all the time. While some Pokemon claim their powders or scales are toxic without further explanation, sometimes causing paralysis, sometimes causing death, kind of roll the dice there, Butterfree learns Poison Powder at level 12, meaning that these scales are just straight up poisonous. I'm also 99% sure the episode where Ash says goodbye to Butterfree shows the mass migration of Butterfree releasing clouds upon clouds of their scales. So now I imagine Butterfree migrations being carefully tracked to make sure people in Pokemon don't just, die from seemingly a super passive and otherwise friendly Pokemon. Pikachu can't quite do much alone. I mean, it can do a lot alone, but bear with me. And when there's a group of them together, then a thunderstorm will appear. It's at least shown in the anime to be a more localized storm that strikes down lightning onto the group, being the explanation as to why Alolan Pikachu fur is so vibrant, glossy, and healthy. But the problem is that they aren't actively summoning this storm, it just happens. A Pikachu daycare would never get covered by insurance. It would be too much of a hazard to have even a few of these Pokemon gathered together, because then lightning will be crashing all over the place, starting fires, dusting everybody that gets too close. I don't want to get hit by one bolt of lightning, let alone lightning summoned by 10 or 20 Pikachu. That feels like a guaranteed death sentence to me. Alolan Vulpix is here by technicality, because it is known to exhale air colder than negative 58 degrees Fahrenheit. This would be negative 50 Celsius, because fun fact, we're now past the point where they match, and that is a terrifying temperature. On one hand, it can do this to fight, but it's also just casually spawning ice shards in hot weather to cool itself as well, since it basically absolutely hates being warm now that its biological structures have changed. Imagine waking up to a room colder than an Antarctic summer, just because your dear little Keo thought it was too warm. Then imagine trying to touch it, and it just flash freezes your hand into instant frostbite. I'm not even joking or exaggerating. At about negative 48 degrees is beyond the point needed to flash freeze things. It will sigh at you, and you will lose a finger, let alone if you upset it and it throws a tantrum. The only thing saving you is by living in a Alola or other warm environments. You get to stand a few feet away from it, and the general cold will kind of even out. Otherwise, I wouldn't even risk touching it and a couple of other ice Pokemon. Vileplume can shake, flap, or burst its petals into bloom with a bang in order to release clouds of pollen. This pollen is yellow and highly allergenic to humans and toxic to other Pokemon. Now, it is stated that they can also use this pollen on their prey, but once again, we get into the concept of this pollen being how they spread their species, like any other plant that uses pollen would. In addition, the larger the Vileplume's petals are, the more potent the toxin on its pollen, or rather in its pollen, is. And I can hear you might be saying, Pokemon don't use pollen to mate or any other way to reproduce, but eggs in the Pokemon world have been described to not really be eggs, but rather be cradles multiple times in the franchise. Now, as it turns out, while Rafflesia pollen in the real world isn't poisonous, Rafflesia plants, which is the inspiration for this Pokemon, contain high levels of tannins, along with other phenolic compounds, particularly in the buds and flowers, which this is just their way of making sure animals don't eat them unless they want to get absolutely destroyed in the stomach. Venomoth is another easy one. Just like Butterfree, the wings are covered with dust-like scales. Every time it flaps its wings, it looses highly toxic dust. Their populations are pretty high, and just like any other moth, they are attracted to lamp. So running around outside at night might not be the greatest idea, but don't worry, it only gets worse with future moth Pokemon. It's great. Kadabra is actually the Pokemon that kicked off this idea for this video as just a fun little thing for me to do because of one terrifying dex entry. When it closes its eyes, twice as many alpha particles come out of the surface of its body. Just in case you don't know, alpha particles are arguably the least dangerous quote-unquote form of radiation, but it is still radiation. Alpha particles lack the energy to penetrate even the outer layer of our skin, so exposure to the outside of the body is not a major concern. But inside the body, they can be very harmful. If alpha emitters are inhaled, swallowed, or get into our body through a cut even, you know, the thing that probably happens a lot in the Pokemon world because of Pokemon hitting you, the alpha particles can damage sensitive living tissue. The way these large, heavy particles cause damage makes them more dangerous than other types of radiation, and since they kind of generally release everything in a small area, they cause more damage to a localized area. Now, we look back at Kadabra, and it states it releases twice as many particles when it closes its eyes, which hopefully that doesn't include sleeping and is just in relation to when they use their powers. Now, many other dex entries do state alpha waves, but alpha waves aren't going to mess with TVs, cause headaches, and ruin precision devices as the way Kadabra does, to my understanding. So when they say alpha waves, they likely aren't talking about anything other than alpha emitters and alpha particles, making it so that trainers who use Kadabra, let alone Alakazam, are likely getting heaping amounts of radiation slammed into their bodies and inside of them whenever they give it a command, which is horrifying to think about. And everyone is out here complaining about Dragalge causing cancer, yet Kadabra has been here since day one. Grimer and Muck are living biohazards that are arguably some of the most dangerous in terms of their ability to just ruin your life. They are composed of sewer water, bacteria, waste of all kinds, and continually feed on all of this waste throughout their lives so they can grow larger. And even when they separate, let's say we cut them in half and they break apart, they just become more of their own kind. They are the Purple Hydra. Hope that doesn't mean anything. Grimer's purple sludge body contains a variety of pungent bacteria, which are so potent that it renders soil barren and incapable of supporting plant life. It is constantly oozing a bacteria-rich fluid from all parts of its body. Should it run out of internal germs, though, it will die. Meanwhile, Muck leaks toxins that instantly kill all plant life that it touches. Even it being in close proximity to plants will cause them to wilt and die. Extreme caution is advised in avoiding any contact with this Pokemon, as an accidental brush-up can lead to severe sickness, all while the stench is strong enough to cause fainting. The effects of this Pokemon can leave the landscape barren for 3 years. This is horrifying because it doesn't matter if your Muck loves you. In fact, it loving you or hating you are the things that will result in it doing more damage than just brushing up against you. If it hates you, it hits you with a sludge wave of death. If it loves you, it's going to envelop you in a hug that will smell like death and begin to rot your skin down to the bone. The closest we have to this in real life, to my understanding, is necrotizing fasciitis, goodness gracious, often called flesh-eating bacteria. It is a rare but severe infection that destroys skin, fat, and muscle tissue. It is a life-threatening emergency caused by bacteria, most commonly Group A Streptococcus, entering the body through cuts or wounds and spreading rapidly. Imagine, oh my god. Imagine having a cut, an open cut, and a Muck touches you. Oh, that's bad. Immediate treatment with surgery and antibiotics is required, often within hours, to avoid death. Again, now take that and imagine it as just one of the hundreds, if not thousands, of different species and kinds of bacteria that Muck is cultivating within its body. The only plus side is that the bacteria are being used up rather than just being fed into this Pokemon. Because again, if they run out of bacteria within their bodies, then they simply pass away. So in all reality, we should be pretty happy that they exist in order to clean up our mess. Just don't go giving it a high five anytime soon. Gastly is admittedly another technicality. It produces a faint sweet smell that is the visible toxic gas surrounding its main body, which can induce fainting and suffocation. It does use this gas as part of its hunting method, but Gastly and the rest of this ghostly line really likes to party it up, play pranks, and are a bit careless in how they act from time to time because of it. It wouldn't surprise me if a Gastly passed through someone's face and accidentally caused them to die is all I'm trying to say here. To our luck, it primarily appears in forests, cemeteries, and abandoned buildings, so, I don't know, just put on a gas mask and you're probably gonna be fine. Speaking of gas and gas masks, Koffing, Weezing, and Galarian Weezing are all threats to our lungs everywhere. What's interesting about them is that they are naturally occurring, not just a Pokemon created by excess human waste. Well, Galarian Weezing is a bit of a different story, but we'll get to that soon enough. Because other than near power plants that emit harmful gas as waste, we'll also find them in places like volcanoes where carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide are primarily released. There are a number of other gases that these Pokemon are also taking into their bodies, but those are the, big ones for volcanic, Koffing, and Weezing. What makes them scarier is that they will mix the gas within their bodies, especially Weezing, creating new gases that are likely even more poisonous to use if we get too close and breathe in their air. And of course, no collection of gas would be fit without the chance of exploding, which all it takes is a light shock or a bit of fire to have the chance of causing any of these Pokemon to go boom. While Galarian Weezing is a little bit better, emitting clean air from its smokestack hat, it's still not a Pokemon you should be breathing the air around. Those green little puffy clouds are known to be toxic and are the culmination of the toxins that they've absorbed into their bodies. They aren't actively releasing them, they just manage to leak their way out. While I'm covering a lot of these passive killers, there are far more Pokemon that could just get the tiniest bit upset and make life so much worse. Just looking back and even Koffing here, when it's agitated, it releases even more fumes from its body. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to corner it. All you have to do is be a little extra annoying and it might decide to smoke you out. Moving forward though, the yawn of a sleeping Kingdra is powerful enough to create undercurrents capable of destroying small ships. Should it decide to emerge from the depths of the ocean, Kingdra's strength can create large whirlpools and water spouts on the surface. Maybe it's hunting another fish or something else it wants to eat, and it accidentally gets you trapped into one of those whirlpools. Because of its immense power, Kingdra often hibernates deep in uninhabited areas of the sea to build up its energy, usually at the bottom of the sea. And that's just insane to me. A yawn, a singular yawn of all things. I yawn between takes of this because I just do not breathe while I'm talking and my body needs that oxygen. Yet a yawn is all it takes for this Pokemon to end the lives of anyone who would otherwise think it's safe to cross the seas with a small crew. But if you think it stopped there, it gets worse. Because in multiple dex entries, it states that just by waking up, it causes tornadoes. What category of tornado it makes is something they do not explain. But you're telling me this dragon casually causes whirlpools, tornadoes, and massive storms by effectively just waking up and yawning? What happens when it gets angry? Do I need to take shelter in a doomsday bunker? This isn't a small Pokemon either, by the way. You can't just shove it into a pocket. No, it is 5'11" or 1.8 meters tall. It is a solid 5 inches taller than me, and that is very incredibly intimidating. I might honestly think I need another video on the horrors of Pokemon's deep ocean, because I've learned so much cursed knowledge regarding the deep blue and Pokemon that live in it, and I need to make you suffer with me. Normally, I wouldn't consider our next entry, as creatures that cause problems just by eating a lot or eating in general should be easy to get around. But I had to include the OG route-blocking, granary-emptying Snorlax in this list because I can guarantee it has caused the death of Pokemon and people just because it went out for a bite to eat and actually swallowed the whole buffet, plates and all. It's not going to be fun to pass a fork through the colon. It sleeps its life away and will only wake up to eat, needing to consume roughly 900 pounds or 400 kilograms of food, which makes up roughly 90% of its total body weight. What that food is doesn't matter. It smells something, it eats it. And Snorlax is not going to shy away from anything. This can be fruit, Pokemon, honey-glazed Pokemon, and even muck without any issue whatsoever. It is more than nature's cleaner. This is the Pokemon that says it wants to take a bite out of your sweet treat and leaves you with nothing but a crumb afterwards if you're lucky. The Hisui Pokédex entry states this glutton appears in villages without warning and devours the entirety of their rice granaries. Such occurrences have long been counted among the gravest of disasters. Because of that, I don't care what anyone says at this point. Snorlax simply wanting to eat food has directly caused the death of multiple people, and at the very least, the Snorlax of older times have kill counts on their heads. We're in Generation 2 now, even though I covered Kingdra early. Oops. But first on this list is Typhlosion, as while it is a bit aggressive and a bit of a fiery Pokemon while awake, it's an accident waiting to happen even while asleep. Typhlosion is known to toss and turn while sleeping. Because this behavior causes its fur to rub together, creating accidental explosions, it is recommended to avoid sleeping Typhlosion. Imagine getting dusted by Typhlosion that's just sleeping. It's probably a great Pokemon to just cuddle with like you would any other pet, plenty warm too, and then all it takes is for 2 bristles of fur to rub against itself, and then boom, there goes you, there goes your house, and Typhlosion is now sad. Which, now that I think about it, I wonder if only the darker blue parts of its fur are explosive, because otherwise any fur around the joints, like, in the armpit, the thigh legs, or I'd say it like that, might just constantly be setting off explosions. Either that or it's bald at those joints to avoid it. Hard to say. Lanturn is another classic, as it has been long understood that it could accidentally create a black hole at any moment while deep beneath the sea. Inside its orbs are bacteria that produce light by absorbing Lanturn's bodily fluids. The flash it creates is visible on the surface from a depth of over 5 kilometers. To put this into perspective, sunlight penetrates the ocean of up to a maximum of 1,000 meters, meaning that Lanturn can produce enough energy from deeper in the sea to then produce enough light that it would penetrate through all the debris and water refraction to still be seen on the surface of the water. But that's where the problem lies, in physics at least. It isn't just penetrating debris, it's effectively impossible for light to make it to the surface because of all the debris. As if this rave party of physics breaking light pollution isn't enough, the sheer amount of power needed to do this is arguably and theoretically astronomical. Now, I will admit, effectively, someone else has done the math for me long ago, with the ocean dampening the light exponentially the further you are away from the source. This means that exponentially more power and light is needed to overcome this dampening, let alone be seen as a bright light on the surface. This then results in 10 to the power of 105 watts. I don't know what number that actually would be, but it's beyond like the billions and trillions and quadrillions. I did not feel like figuring it out because that's a very, very big number, releasing more energy than 10 to the power of the 35th observable universe mass energy equivalents. What does this mean for the nerds who don't like numbers? This means that with this sheer amount of power and in such a pressurized environment, I will always claim, even if it wasn't, if this was the real world, Lanturn setting off this light at any point would result in a black hole being formed effectively every single time. Now rethink that showing of Lanturn congregating together and think of the sheer number of universe-consuming black holes that would form in an instant over and over again, combining into each other to create something with even higher density that will eventually swallow up all of existence just because Lanturn wanted to attract a mate. And yes, anglerfish do use their lights for attracting mates, not just for attracting prey, which, to be entirely fair, are the same thing when you think about it. The males that attach to them, they release their stuff into the female, and then there are no more than dead growth on the female afterwards. It's a beautiful but scary world out there. We're moving on. I would be terrified to walk into the forests of Pokemon, not just because of Pokemon like Scolipede scuttling around in my fear of centipedes, but because Yanma and Yanmega might take flight and accidentally send me into the next country or liquidate my internal organs. The Dex likes to state that if Yanma flaps its wings really fast, then it can generate shockwaves that will shatter windows in the area, or at least in Hisuian times, it could launch a house skyward. I am not heavier than a house, and I don't think my skin is more durable than a window. Technically. Also, the fact that it says if it flaps its wings fast, as if dragonflies aren't already fluttering their wings so fast that we can hardly process their movement with our eyes. To put it into perspective, dragonflies typically flap their wings at a rate of roughly 30 to 40 times per second. What is that? 60 times 30? That's 100. No, that's 1,800 times per minute, to put that into perspective. While this is slower than many other flying insects, their ability to move all four wings independently or in unison allows them to reach speeds of up to 35 miles per hour, hover, and fly in any direction. Thank you, Cornell University, for that information. That only makes me more terrified of the super-powered Yanma that does exist. Meanwhile, these shockwaves can just be constantly generated anytime Yanmega beats its wings, which it of course does while flying. These shockwaves are so powerful that when it takes off in flight, they accidentally dislodge full-grown trees and cause critical internal injuries. To clarify, shockwaves are the force damage of the real world for our D&D nerds out there. It's basically all the molecules between it and you being moved around even though we can't see it with our eyes. And when that makes contact with you, your body is going to feel it on that molecular level, and so will you. This means that when it says internal damage, you might get a bruise on the outside at worst, but on the inside, your kidney probably just exploded from the energy exerted by that shockwave, causing internal bleeding at best, probably liquidation of internal organs at worst, when Yanmega actually considers you a nuisance. Please keep them locked away in the Carboniferous period where they belong. They're really cool Pokemon, and whoever decided bug Pokemon were supposed to be weak clearly have no idea how terrifying they really are. God nerfed bugs for a reason. Actually, that could be another shirt, a little God nerfed bugs. While it is technically a defense mechanism, Wobbuffet does nothing and wins nearly every single time. Insert Luigi does nothing meme here. It is a living punching bag that grows up from a Wynot that has trained itself to take hit after hit after hit and then return the power in full force and then some. They never attack first. They do not hunt other Pokemon and instead just really love fruit. And yet, if you decide to step in the ring with one, you will get shadow tagged and be forced to stay in the battle until you either give up or you have the force of a Gigaton bomb whipped at you while it smiles innocently at your demise. Surely it can't tank every single hit, you say? Wrong. An attack from the mighty Giratina is shot out with full intent to kill it during the Hoopa movie, as it is under the control of our nefarious genie. And as it misses Ash and the gang, it nearly hits Team Rocket. Their saving grace is their Wobbuffet, who stands front and center, eats that horse, and tanks that shot, reflecting it back at Giratina in the process. A punching bag that can reflect the attack of a god Pokemon is nothing to scoff at. It is a beast. It will win by doing, again, absolutely nothing. Now we're finally on to the classic Magcargo, whose internal body temperature can reach over 18,000 degrees Fahrenheit or 10,000 degrees Celsius in non-American numbers, making it hotter than the surface of the sun and able to evaporate water on contact according to the Dex. Now, new problem here. This is just the internal body temperature. This would explain why it doesn't evaporate water within a certain radius of it, unlike Pokemon such as Magneton. Nevertheless, there's no way whatsoever that all this heat is staying within its body. It has to be radiating outward in some capacity, right? Well, magma can range between 700 and 1300 degrees Celsius, or 1292 and 2372 Fahrenheit, and considering this is what Magcargo's body is made up of, let's use this as our relative basis to relatively figure out what the ambient heat around Magcargo is, or what it could be melting around its body, or how far away you have to be safe. Magma are rocks that have been under so much pressure and heat in some combination that they have become this molasses of an ooze, but only the immediate air around it is going to be just as hot. It's often recommended to stay 30 meters or roughly 98 feet away from the flow of lava just for you to be safe and protect your lungs and everything else. But theoretically, you can get much closer, especially as it cools and you aren't just, trying to look down the face of a volcano, because that would be a pretty poor choice. You also need to be careful of the chemicals that are being released into the air. Unfortunately, there really isn't a simple and clean way to get this calculation done without spending hours upon hours on this, which I am not doing. The closest I can get is that the internal temperature of a glass furnace reaches between 1400 and 2200 degrees Celsius, and if you are even a singular meter away from it, you will still feel 65 Celsius or 149 Fahrenheit of that temperature. Now, I'm going to admit now, you should not do what I'm about to do mathematically because it will not be accurate, but it's the closest that we can get in an ideal environment with straight conversion. If 2200 is to 65, then 10,000 becomes about 295 Celsius if we cross multiply and divide. Again, unrealistic, but most ideal environment within a 1 meter distance from Magcargo based on this info. That is how hot it would be. This means that if you stand within a meter of Magcargo, within 3-ish feet, you will face a minimum temperature of 563 degrees Fahrenheit or 295 Celsius, which will auto-ignite dry wood, just shy of immediately igniting any tree within a meter of it, diesel fuel, gasoline, paper, leather, and anything else with an auto-ignition temperature below that, which is horrifying, instantly up in flames. And Magcargo brought indoors would eventually light an entire house aflame because these numbers are just what it takes to immediately cause things within a meter of it to effectively, spontaneously combust. This doesn't take into account Magcargo being in one spot for more than just a few seconds before disappearing. And once again, the temperature would effectively be the same if it made contact with anything from its body, that 10,000 Celsius, meaning anything it touches will be melted to nothingness until it reaches the core and is spat back up by the volcano once again. Magcargo is no joke. Also, if there are any super science nerds that want to tackle the actual math on that, I will absolutely pin your comments because that would be amazing to see the true math on that, because I'm probably off by a good chunk of numbers. It might be even hotter. Entei is another technicality only because anytime it roars or barks or whatever the Pokédex really wants to claim in its translations and mistranslations, it causes a random volcano to erupt. If it hears a doorbell ring and it starts going crazy, then we're just going to face another mass extinction event, because more than just the lava, we're going to see the sky blotted out by all the pyroclastic material and smoke that they release, leaving us with generations of cold, destitution, and probably another 80-90% of all species getting wiped out. Thanks, Entei. Our last entry of Johto is Lugia, because while in Pokopia it can fly around without causing any storms, it makes it pretty clear that in a time when it was careless, it would cause great storms by just flapping its wings, and it scared a lot of Pokemon, which of course made it feel bad. Now, of course, this is in reference to the 40-day storms that it causes, which, really interestingly, is a direct reference to the 40 days and 40 nights that occur in the Bible, specifically during the Great Flood, which is absolutely wild to me every single time that I say it, but so many Pokemon have very strong religious ties to the world, and especially with Shinto belief, which I highly recommend checking out my videos exploring all of those because it explains a lot. Nevertheless, Lugia knows this is the level of power that it has, and in order to prevent it causing cataclysmic destruction by just existing, it decides that it would rather isolate itself deep beneath the ocean and rest in solitude, otherwise being very careful in the era of Pokopia. Once again, it's actually kind of funny because Lugia in Pokopia is a solitary creature, saying how it doesn't like to be around others and that we should really talk to Ho-Oh because it's far more of a chatty extrovert. We're in Hoenn, and of course we have to start with the killer flying bug of the generation, Dustox. Swarms are attracted by the bright light of cities, where they wreak havoc by devouring the leaves off roadside trees, and when Dustox flaps its wings, a fine dust is scattered all over. This dust is actually a powerful poison that will even make a pro wrestler sick, the very healthy, we then assume. Again, they do use it for self-defense as well, but they also just casually throw out a dust all over the place as they fly, making the air itself a death hazard. I'm already an asthmatic. I do not need Dustox making my life any harder. You can't even escape them by living in the city either, because once again, they are moths, and they are attracted to lamp. So in other news, I will never be moving to Hoenn, even if I get isekai'd into the world of Pokemon. I choose life. Thank you very much. Shroomish spouts poison spores from its head if it's in danger, if it's happy, if it has a lot of energy, if it is looking to spread its species and breed, if it just exists. It is a mushroom after all, and by technicality, all of our mushroom Pokemon would be the sexual organ of the mushroom, as opposed to the mycelium, making it so any mushroom Pokemon should be releasing spores at all times. These spores are more than just dangerous, they can and will cause pain throughout your entire body if you inhale them at all. Not all that surprising, since you really should not be breathing in mushroom spores in the first place, unless you want the chance of having a fungal infection colonizing in your lungs. Fortunately, our bodies are pretty well adapted to fighting against fungus, so it's not the absolute end of the world, and the chances are relatively low unless you get into some niche scenarios or specific species, or decide you want to snort a mushroom for some ungodly reason. Please do not do that. Also, if you want more on mushrooms, there's a members only video for you. It's a fun one, literally talking about mushrooms and learning about our fungal world and how weird it is. Just by being curious and looking into the hole in its back and witnessing whatever exists within its hollow body, you will have your soul stolen away by Shedinja. What I've never understood is why it does this at all. Sure, there are a lot of different ideas and motifs going on here, such as the idea of it being a guardian angel born from a discarded husk, but why steal the soul? To my knowledge, nobody has ever talked about having their soul stolen, nor do we see someone's soul stolen in any of the games, the anime, the manga, anywhere. It might just be a rumor, but also it seems like you need to actively grab it and look into its back in order to have your soul taken away, not just stand behind it and accidentally see the hole while you're giving it commands as its trainer. There's genuinely nothing that I can find on how this was inspired into creation. My only bet is that since this creature is born from the discarded husk of the still living Ninjask, then this is a being with a body and mind but no soul, thus needing one in order to be a complete living creature. If it's not, then it's just a cool Pokemon that's still currently the only bug ghost type. Whismur is another technicality only because you don't even have to go near it in order for it to kill you with its screaming. If it gets startled at all, then it will cry as loud as a jet engine taking off, placing it between 130 and 150 decibels, which is already at a level in which it causes immediate physical harm. Meaning if you decide to take a stroll through Whismur Cave or through any place that has even one Whismur, let alone many, then you could not only go deaf, but have internal damage because it got scared of its reflection, or because it got scared of a Zubat, or whatever else. And then, since Whismur Bobby got scared, it scared Whismur Zoe, which in turn scared every single other Whismur in the area, as they not only can easily startle each other, but they also get scared of their own cries. I love Whismur, I really do. It's one of my favorites because it is very cute, and X-Plot is pretty cool looking. But just like a baby, Whismur will start crying and will not stop until it is properly calmed down, exhausts itself, or its ear holes are covered, which is actually how it breathes, so the Pokedex is asking you to suffocate a baby. I don't condone it, I'm just the messenger here, okay? Until then, though, these noises will compound and even be amplified within the cave, making matters far worse, as at 150 to 160 decibels, we get lung vibration, internal organ damage, and severe discomfort, as if that's like the primary thing we should be worried about. Oh, it feels like my lungs are about to burst, but I just feel uncomfortable. But at 185 decibels, we get lung embolisms or even full-on fatal injuries. This is no longer about covering your ears. This is being in the presence of something so loud that it vibrates your entire body, that it causes blood flow to be restricted, heart attacks, stroke, maybe even rupturing if it's powerful enough, considering, you know, it's a Pokemon. All just because it is scared and crying. It's not trying to attack you. People always talk about how 1 billion lions could defeat Pokemon, but then forget that baby Whismur will accidentally cry so loud that it will just vibrate them into paste. I've had so many people tell me I should tackle the Pokemon versus Lions video, and it just seems like so much work, and I need to have my own spin on it, and maybe I'll do it one day if people really, really want it. Our closer for Hoenn is surprisingly Rayquaza. It only appears here because within the Pokemon Adventures manga, it is revealed that Rayquaza naturally generates and releases ozone from its body in order to function in space. While this is great for Rayquaza, this is a horrifying reality for the lore keepers, as Zinnia makes it very clear that this is the reason why the person who rides Rayquaza has to be a lore keeper, because their people do not wish to sacrifice anyone else to such a horrifying and painful fate. Good thing is that we live in the modern age and we can wear spacesuits instead of sacrificing the innocent. It's a great time to be alive. On to Sinnoh, but instead of a moth or butterfly killing us with their scales, we get murdered by one of the cutest Pokemon in the franchise, Budew. It thrives on clean water, but the cleaner the water is that it's raised on, the more toxic its pollen is. And surprise, it releases pollen every spring in celebration of warmer weather. If you're lucky, it will just cause sneezing and runny noses, but that means that Budew is not being raised on clean water like it should be, and it's likely unhealthy. So then you raise it on clean water only to get a face full of highly toxic pollen, and then you die instead. There's no winning with this Pokemon whatsoever. You're better off cultivating them outside and then bringing them indoors during the winter unless you want another child murdering you. I'm gonna paint a picture. So, picture this for me. You're walking through the lands around Mount Coronet. It's a chilly but beautiful day. The type where the sun is shining, there's crisp fresh air, and there's no wind. It's just below freezing temperature, so nothing melts, but the warmth of the sun and your extra layers of clothing are enough to keep you plenty cozy and comfortable for hours. At least until an Abomasnow wakes up and waves its arms around, which is all it needs to not only cause a blizzard, but to cause full-on whiteout conditions. Now, if you're prepared for this, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. If you weren't in the mountains, this wouldn't be that big of a deal. But if you manage to make the poor decision of walking through the valley between the crests of Mount Coronet without the right gear or the right Pokemon, you've just sealed your fate. Especially as now that Abomasnow is awake, it'll just keep that blizzard strong until it falls asleep again, making sure nobody will ever find it as it blends into the perfect conditions it needs in order to camouflage itself. Technically, Azelf doesn't kill you, but if you try to hurt it at all, then all humans just stop moving forever. Legends say that if Azelf is harmed, it can cause humans to lose all will inside of them, making them completely immobile for all eternity. This isn't even to say what happens to Azelf if it is killed. This is just if it is harmed. Now, I am assuming that this is supposed to mean all humans, and this isn't just a defense mechanism which is described in other parts of its lore. It's made very clear that Azelf can control the willpowers of others, puppet them, or just erase their willpower altogether. But considering the wording, it definitely implies that if Azelf faces any injury, then all of humanity would cease to function. To me, this isn't that big of a stretch, since it is the being that governs over willpower, and in the case that it is the actual Azelf, then it makes sense that if you injure or kill a god of willpower, then willpower ceases to exist. And for a quick reminder and clarification, the original name for the Lake Guardians is that they are called the Lake Gods. There's a ton more usage of the word god throughout Pokemon, but it's never really translated into all of the other languages, so it's, lost as part of the process. Closing out Sinnoh is Darkrai, and even further than this, Mega Darkrai. To begin, Darkrai already struggles to control its powers as we learn throughout the games. This power causes people and Pokemon to fall asleep and suffer from horrible nightmares. While it also does this in order to protect itself, a Darkrai passing by a random person will likely accidentally cause them to pass out and have nightmares about their greatest fears. Through Pokemon Sleep, we learn just how bad this gets because it has tried using its signature move, Dark Void, while asleep, which is attributed to it not being able to control its overwhelming power. Dark Void itself will not only put a victim to sleep, but it will also trap them in an eternal nightmare that Darkrai can feed on. It would not surprise me at all if I found out that Darkrai accidentally sent someone to its nightmare dimension without knowing and just left them there to suffer forever until Cresselia found them and freed them from the prison. Taking this that extra step further now, within the Mega Dimension DLC, Darkrai is revealed to have been the cause for the entire event, which would not have happened if Darkrai didn't just sit at the top of Prism Tower. The more I think about it, the more I want to make fun of Darkrai. Because sure, choose the place that, while yes, it's just far enough away from humans to make sure it doesn't hurt anyone, it chose the big, threateningly glowing tower full of incredible energy to make a home at until Anj unleashed enough energy to reduce Lumiose to nothing but dust, hit Darkrai in the process, and then forced it to Mega Evolve against its will. This event doesn't sound bad on the surface, but this dimension is the equivalent of mementos from Persona. It is the collective consciousness and subconsciousness of all that has ever been and all that is within Lumiose. It is made very clear that nothing in Hyperspace Lumiose is technically fake, that instead it manifests what we really wish for, while also randomly giving form to the thoughts, emotions, and memories of the public. It can't just manifest something that doesn't exist, though. It is easily one of the coolest ideas in all of Pokemon that is trapped behind an excessive amount of grinding if you don't do things right, but that is neither here nor there. Because Hyperspace Lumiose is like some of the scariest SCPs. It is a straight-up cognito hazard, meaning that the more people know about it, the more dangerous it becomes. It becomes more stable, but becomes less predictable to us. It expands, it can hold more people within it, and it gets closer and closer to swallowing up all of regular Lumiose. If this wasn't stopped, then it's fair to assume that people outside Lumiose would learn about it, and it would become even more powerful and it would expand more. All of Kalos would know, and it would be swallowed up because they knew. Every region slowly but surely being absorbed into a world where anything can happen. A place where every past event, every thought, every dangerous and powerful Pokemon can go on a rampage as they are filled with incredible energy, placed in an unfamiliar place, and eventually start attacking. Mega Darkrai has the potential of becoming one of the greatest worldwide threats, and it isn't even trying. It does all of this by only coming into existence. Musharna is all cute and adorable until it starts eating a bad dream. Then we have a problem on our hands. It is advised not to approach a Musharna when its dream mist is dark in color, as the dark mist brings a person's nightmares to life. Once again, a moment in which nightmares are weaponized against us just by being in close proximity to a Pokemon. We could be best friends with our Musharna, feed it good dreams, make sure it gets the best food properly crafted by the famous Brock. And yet, if it has dark dream mist spouting from its body and I approach it, a billion Scolipede and Centiskorch will crawl all over me because of my fear of centipedes. Great! That's also assuming it doesn't go beyond surface level fears. Maybe Musharna will turn everything into a horror movie, or create a nightmare version of friends and family. Maybe it'll create its own mega dimension and be ruled by a centipede god. The outcomes are horrifyingly limitless. Alright, I'm gonna admit this next one isn't at fault of Reuniclus. It's only here because I would be stupid enough to try the one thing its Dex entry warns us not to do. Drinking the liquid covering Reuniclus's body is said to grant wisdom. However, the liquid is extremely toxic, which is heavily ironic. It's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have drank that. I am a glutton for knowledge, though. There's a lot I would do for unlimited knowledge as long as it meant I didn't hurt another living being. Give me the full metal treatment. Take my arm and leg away. Let me see the truth, which, ironically, that is exactly what you should not do, and it defeats the entire purpose of the show's hidden message, alongside a number of different themes revolving around legendary Pokemon. So maybe it's not something that should be done, but that wouldn't stop me. I would drink small amounts of Reuniclus liquid so I can build an immunity to it, dilute it properly and all. Grant me the knowledge that I crave while you Reuniclus just stares at me confused as to why I'm transforming into a malnourished Hulk in the fetal position on the ground. Now, for this next one, I just released a video that spends time talking about how Volcarona created Yamask and killed an entire civilization of people, so I won't spend a lot of time here on it. What I will say is effectively the summary, which is that we can't find Unova and Yamask anywhere in the world except for in the Relic Castle. This would be the castle that people sequester themselves within so they can survive the worsening climate outside. As part of this, in order to stay warm in a world without the sun, they started to worship Volcarona, emissary of the sun, in their own words. Unfortunately, as the doors were sealed shut and airflow was low to non-existent, the worst and most horrifying outcome came to be. And it's simply because, once again, we have yet another moth that sheds killer scales. The difference this time is that these scales burn up all the oxygen in a room, making it so that while people are warm, the very air they breathe is lacking the oxygen they need, causing them all to suffocate with full lungs. Being near Volcarona in general is just a massive hazard. Imagine what it's like when it's actually attacking and how much oxygen is burned up in any fight it's involved in, especially when it goes all out like it did in the fight against N. Kalos somehow manages to only have 2 Pokemon that can erase you from a mortal plane by just existing. The first is technically Sliggoo. Sliggoo excretes and coats its body with sticky mucus that can dissolve anything. Because it lacks teeth, it sprays this liquid onto prey and slurps them up once they are dissolved. Unfortunately, its eyes have atrophied or devolved to some degree, making it difficult for it to tell allies from prey, and it will sometimes attempt to melt its companions. Even if it isn't trying to dissolve you into fine non-existence, it is directly recommended in the Pokédex to put on gloves before touching it. I'm sorry, but gloves are not going to be enough. Sliggoo, and especially its evolution, are fans of hugs, which, while adorable, seems like it would spell doom in a slow and agonizingly painful way. Actually, it has to be probably really sad to watch as Sliggoo accidentally disintegrates one of its friends with a hug, leaving it all alone and depressed afterwards. Simply put, if you're going to have a Sliggoo, have a special suit that you can wear to prevent yourself from being dissolved, and maybe wrap everything in plastic so it doesn't, accidentally consume everything that it touches, which this is also assuming that there's any way to prevent these problems, since it does directly state that the mucus can dissolve everything, and it is coated in this mucus like any other slug, so it can prevent itself from dehydrating like it was bathed in salt. So, good luck. Our other entry from Kalos is the legendary Pokemon of death itself, Yveltal. While yes, it can wave its arms and use Oblivion Wing to snuff out all forms of life that it makes contact with, there's a much easier and passive way that Yveltal can end the lives of everything from plants to Pokemon, humans to fungi, so on and so forth, and it's just by us attacking it. In the event that Yveltal is attacked, the only way to properly stop it from becoming an issue is through capturing it. If not, then it will naturally and passively draw all forms of life energy to it, completely draining and killing any Pokemon and human and withering plants within range as their life forces are reduced and it is revitalized. Yveltal needed to be confronted by the elites of Team Flare. Even while it was in its dormant state, it still managed to nearly defeat them while taking out a number of other Team Flare squads in the process. Yveltal's dormant state just sits there, curled up with its wings around it looking like an egg, and you're telling me that it can defeat trainers and Pokemon, killing them even while completely asleep? In fact, yes, because while it or even Xerneas are in their dormant states, they are recollecting life energy into their bodies so they can awaken and function once more. So there's an even greater chance with understanding this that Yveltal can kill anyone who gets close to it even while it is asleep, taking away their lives as they are just a glass of water being used to refill an ocean. This next one is a little funny, and I have footage of this happening, so it makes it all that much better to me. Minior is a Pokemon that forms within the planet's atmosphere. As it grows with particles absorbed into its body, creating its outer shell, it eventually becomes so heavy that it can no longer hold itself up in the atmosphere. Once it reaches this point, it falls as a shooting star down to the planet. What's hilarious is that whereas it might be incredibly rare for a shooting star to actually crash down onto the planet, Minior are guaranteed to crash down in places such as Alola and in the Lental region of Pokemon Snap. And when this happens in the nighttime desert landscape of Lental, we can witness multiple crash landings of Minior, with one in particular nearly killing a Scorpy minding its business, only to be launched into the air and flipped onto its back from a Pokemon traveling at terminal velocity and just barely missing it. At least we know where they crash down the most. So as long as you aren't taking a date to the Hokulani Observatory, there's a chance that, you won't be made spontaneously single by a fat Minior making a crash landing next to you. Of all the Tapus, Tapu Lele manages to continue our trend of dropping scales that can kill a man. And guess what? When it closes its shell, what does it turn into? A butterfly, proboscis and all. It is known to scatter glowing scales, which affect others by stimulating and healing their bodies. However, these scales are also dangerous if too many are touched at once. Tapu Lele is sometimes described as cruel for the way it weakens others, as it scatters its scales for its own amusement. This makes it so that the scales can be touched whenever found, and they might weaken the individual, they might heal them, or if they decide to touch too many at once, something dangerous happens. Is this the part where I get to push the "this Pokemon gives you cancer" button again? Or at least some sort of tumorous growth thanks to the abundance of cells and sudden healing? Cursed thoughts just entered the building. It makes you pregnant, even if you're a guy. Get a big old belly like all those emoji of men holding their stomachs as if they're pregnant. Have fun giving birth. Ultra Necrozma is the final entry of Alola, the true embodiment of light itself. I would say the sun, but, Solgaleo likes to claim that title despite Ultra Necrozma's many stats that make it one of the most dangerous Pokemon in existence, resembling the sun even when it isn't doing anything at all. Necrozma is at its full power when it is Ultra Necrozma, radiating energy that has all sorts of effects on living beings and even nature itself. Its body temperature exceeds 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 5,540 degrees Celsius. Anything that it touches will melt from the extreme heat. It can fire laser beams from every part of its body, burning through everything in its path over 18 miles away. Body temperature that exceeds the surface temperature of the sun? Check. Ability to melt anything that it touches? Check. Ability to fire laser beams that will give a direct form of source blast, sun-leveled power directly to your doorstep? Also check. It's weird that it says it can, quote-unquote, fire lasers from its body, as if it doesn't constantly release beams of sunlight from its body that travel through space and universes in order to provide light and Z-power to other planets or locations, such as, Alola. While the sun in our world lets off a ridiculous amount of energy, heat, and sunlight, because the Earth was ever so lucky to be placed exactly where we are, the planet not only formed properly, but could also form an atmosphere and water without getting burnt to a crisp, or being so far that everything is too cold to persist, to oversimplify it. Meanwhile, Ultra Necrozma is the tried and true sun, radiating light and heat, and yet we bring it to our part of the universe, onto the planet, and treat it like just another adorable pet as we throw it into Pokemon battles. The reason why its signature Z move is called the Light That Burns the Sky is because the sheer amount of power it is releasing is ripping a hole in the atmosphere, the sky itself. And even if we didn't consider all of this, its body is so much larger than Magcargo. Ultra Necrozma is at least in the Pokédex 24 foot 7 inches, or 7.5 meters in height, making Ultra Necrozma apparently only taller than a 2-story building. This also isn't even considering its wingspan, which is likely double that at minimum. But when we look at the anime or manga, or even when we just first see it, I can't even begin to try and comprehend the sheer size of this Pokemon. It's absolutely absurd. It isn't the size of the literal sun, but the size is redonkulous. Such a massive creature having such a high body temperature means there's overall far more energy and heat being radiated from its body, so I'm just gonna say that you aren't getting within, 500 feet without feeling your lungs dehydrate. It's such a dangerous creature, but it's so very cool, so it gets a pass. I'm gonna admit it feels like such a downgrade to continue on from Ultra Necrozma into any other Pokemon as we move into Galar, but here we are anyway with Centiskorch, more specifically GMax Centiskorch. Centiskorch's firepower when Gigantamax increases, resulting in its internal temperature exceeding 1800 Fahrenheit or 1000 Celsius. The heat waves coming off of a GMax Centiskorch are hot enough to burn opponents and disturb the air currents to the point of causing storms to form. I, somehow, have zero recollection of GMax Centiskorch being able to release so much heat that storms form, but it makes sense, especially since it is known as the Radiator Pokemon. It is also over 246 feet and 1 inch long, that 1 inch is very important, or 75 meters long, making it so that the heat is dispersed over such a massive swath of air that it legitimately could theoretically affect the weather as a whole. Evaporating water, bringing heat to cooler environments, causing massive movements in air patterns due to its sheer size and movement. It all adds up to allow this Pokemon to move around, and if it doesn't cook you by having one part of its body next door to your house, then it just causes a storm that might turn catastrophic. Might just be a regular storm, it doesn't really say. All I say is that I would rather not have the world's largest centipede anywhere near me, let alone one that can roast me alive. One of my favorite regional variants, Reuniclus, might not kill you, but things might get so bad that you might wish that it did. The deck's entry states, a powerful curse was woven into an ancient painting. Never touch its shadow-like body, or you'll be shown the horrific memories behind the picture carved into it. But I'm also sure that it goes deeper than this, especially as they are based on Viking runestones. These stones have the same premise behind them, ancient stones that will place a curse on anyone that touches them. This is because these stones are supposed to serve as religious gravestones of the Vikings, their final place of rest to never be disturbed. And if they are ever disturbed in any way, then a horrifying curse is placed upon the offender. This, in turn, is how Galarian Yamask is created. Someone, somewhere, decided it would be a good idea to not touch a runestone, but to cause some form of damage or disrespect the stone, causing a curse to be placed that would prevent the individual's soul from passing on. Once again, we have a human spirit being trapped on the mortal plane, making sense as to why it takes the same shape but yet Galarian Yamask is vastly different from Unovan Yamask. The only tie being that these are human souls trapped on the mortal plane, again taking that same shape, unable to move on to the afterlife. And as per usual, it only gets worse. The tablet on Galarian Yamask absorbing energy from it until it can be reincarnated into Reuniclus, now perpetuating the cycle of passive curses that transform people into more of its kind. We're finally in Paldea, beginning with Greavard. It is really easy to befriend, and it will follow anyone who gives it the slightest bit of attention forever. However, it is advised not to play with Greavard too often, as it is known to slowly and unwittingly drain the life force of those near it, which it can do by rubbing its fur against others. It is rumored that Greavard is the reincarnation of a dog Pokemon that had never interacted with a human and died in the wild. So many other ghost Pokemon actively and willingly take the life force of others, whether it be Spectre stealing ambient life force, Litwick stealing life energy while it leads you through mazes, and so many others. But Greavard is the only Pokemon that loves you so much that it will rub against you like any other dog seeking attention would, while accidentally slowly killing you without either of you noticing it. The only good news is this: life energy in Pokemon isn't necessarily your lifespan. You aren't going to have a shorter lifespan from any of the Pokemon that I've mentioned. Life Force is like a stamina bar that you can refill, which is best shown through an episode involving Morlo and Shiinotic in the anime, where Ash just eats to refill his energy as the mushroom Pokemon takes it away for the life of the forest. All this means then is that when you start feeling a little more exhausted than usual, you'll need to make sure Greavard stops trying to rub against you for attention, or else Greavard will be all on its own all over again. Our final entry is actually 4 Pokemon in one, the Treasures of Ruin. Any one of these Pokemon have passive abilities that cause an incredible amount of destruction with 0 effort whatsoever. Wo-Chien is able to drain the life force of vegetation in a wide area around it, causing entire forests and fields to instantly become barren. Chien-Pao is described as being able to control 100 tons of fallen snow, causing avalanches and playing around in them innocently. King Lu is described as being able to create fissures over 160 feet or 50 meters deep just by slowly putting its head down to the ground. And Chiyu's flames burn at over 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit, 3K Celsius, allowing it to melt rock and sand into lava that it can swim through. There's definitely some gray area here, as they have their abilities that cause detrimental effects to all Pokemon in battle, so I wouldn't be surprised if they could not only passively cause all of these effects, but can also make them far worse if they were actively trying to cause destruction, which might be the reason as to why they had to be sealed away. And, you know, something that is very strange is that we are encouraged by Rhyhorn to release them, which, while she is very obsessed with ancient history and wanting to see it firsthand clearly, it makes me wonder if she knew that these seals would only last so long, and these treasures of calamity would have their effects slowly leak out more and more over time as these seals would break. But that is a story for a different day. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you enjoyed, and if you did enjoy, I highly recommend any of my other deep dives on this channel. In addition, let me know the Pokemon that caught you off guard, or any Pokemon that you think I should have included here. I love reading the comments, plus they help appease the mighty algorithm. I also want to say thank you to members of the channel that you see on screen. They make a massive difference as I work on these videos and take the time necessary to bring you quality content. If you'd like early access to videos, monthly insiders, and members exclusive videos, become a member for as little as $3 a month. Lastly, one of my favorite comments from this past week is from Krill Final Fantasy XIV, who heard the story of the person who worked on my tattoo, revealing that he was a massive conspiracy theorist in the middle of my tattoo, and it drove me insane. One of the parts was simply that the sun can't be real, he said, because it hurts to look at, but if you look at fire, your eyes don't hurt. And I can tell this did psychic damage to Krill because he gives all that good, intricate info on the sun and how it gives off 380 billion terajoules per second, whereas a candle lets off only 420,000 joules per second, which is an insanely massive difference. That guy was a flat earther, didn't believe fossils are real, and even said he wasn't a sovereign citizen, but rather a sovereign person, I think, something along those lines, because calling himself a citizen means he's still owned by the government. This just gives me a massive headache just recounting this story. So before I give myself psychic damage again, I just want to say, as always, Thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Don't do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!